First of all, I teach contemporary topics in America. It's a social studies elective class, and it's usually geared for upperclassmen. And so the way I've structured the class is very student-driven. So we've talked a lot about like media bias and how to evaluate sources, and then students were given the option to choose what topics they wanted to talk about. And the first one that they voted up was social media, and then after that was mental health. So as a class, we decided to just put that together. So essentially what we've been looking at is how social media impacts our mental health, if it does at all, and short answer is yes. And we've been doing some really cool research in that class, and they've been kind of finding out what is really the drawback, reflecting on their personal experiences with it, both inside of school and outside of school. And then I had Don and Stephanie come in and do their podcast to get their insight. And so I was then connected with Julie Smith, who's a little bit more of an expert in media literacy. And so she was our speaker today and kind of gives some more insights into why social media is in use, or maybe the implications of that, both good and bad, and just giving students another speaker outside of my voice.
I travel around and do a lot of talks for high schoolers around the country, and the schools that have banned the phone. In fact, I spoke to one yesterday. The students complain for about a week, and then they acknowledge that they absolutely love it. The people that complain the most are the parents. The parents were the ones who protest more than the parents, which I think is really interesting.
I mean, what do you hear from the parents? I would bet we would find something similar here.
I think that parents are used to having constant access. I've had parents say that they want their kids to have a phone in case there's a school shooting. They want to make sure that they can access their kid. But at the same time, like, how much can a student or a young adult grow when there's always a safety net there and they're never forced to figure things out by themselves? You know, like, my parents dropped me off for college and said, call on Sundays and let us know how things are going. And the technology has changed to the point where that just seems really archaic now. And maybe parents just don't want to lose control. What's weird is that when I do parent workshops, they usually fall into two categories. Like, parents don't know anything about social media, or parents are like, give me an app to track my kid. And there's really no middle ground. But I can tell you, yesterday at that school where I was, the kids were talking to each other, they were interacting with each other, they weren't completely distracted. And so, like, my students before class starts, they're just like this. They don't speak to each other. It's so bizarre. It's a quiet room. And I really think if we're talking about, like, the future employers are going to want people and employees who can make eye contact with people and carry on conversations and actually have interpersonal skills. And these, you know, there's that whole device paradigm is what it's called. The idea that technology can help us, but at the same time, it distracts us in other ways. So this is magic. This is a magic little box that has more computing power than NASA had when they sent the Apollo 11 to the moon. But at the same time, this is killing our interpersonal communication abilities to the point where many of my students can't hold a conversation with an adult. As an instructor, as a teacher, I take it personally when I have prepared something for my class that I think is awesome, and this is all I can see of a kid. I spoke at a high school here in St. Louis last week, and it was an all-girls school, and a bunch of the girls came up to me afterwards and asked, how can we get our moms off their phones more? And it shocked me because, you know, your generation is the one that gets blamed all the time for being on your phone all the time. But I think parents have as much of a struggle as young adults do.
At the very least, I hope that they're just more reflective in their own practices, and especially since they chose to learn about this, I think there's been a little bit more investment there. And it's also just, I think, eye-opening to see what their thinking is the same throughout the class, maybe a couple of outliers, but they all seem to understand like it is impacting it. There are negative consequences here, but where is the line that we draw? Like, do we ban it altogether? How does that teach us how to use it? And so they're figuring out those real world connections that make it more relevant to them. And then maybe they'll see changes in high school, or, they're upperclassmen, so eventually college. And again, being upperclassmen, they're the leaders of our school. So I think even that is a huge impact. I hope they take away just the relevance that they're looking at, a modern issue in America.